Welcome to Book 2, Chapter 1, with John Jughead Pearson, reading his book, Weasels in a Box. Chapter 1, Book 2, page 113. And so we begin. Oh, look at this. There's something in parentheses at the beginning. It says, "Wake up! Don't fall into folly. You knew from the very end that you were not who I say you are." You knew from the very end. That's a play on you knew from the very beginning. But the beginning is the end. That's my little joke to myself. So here we go. You open your eyes. What time is it? Where am I? There's no watch on your wrist. I don't wear a watch, you say, very frustrated with yourself for even looking. Neither do you have any jewelry nor tattoos. It is not that any of these other items help to tell the time or the date or conspire against the time or date. It's just something you notice when checking your wrist for a watch that continually never exists the moment you look for it. This whole thing, there's an in-joke sort of here too, but I wanted to make it sort of just more objective in the writing. But a lot of my plays, when I started writing them with my cast, my Hope and Non-Things theater cast, we began referencing that all the characters, the lead characters in all my plays would, at some point during the play, check their wrist for a watch and then realize they don't have one. It just became like a running joke that they would do. So that's why I added it to the book. How long have you been curled up in here with your back pressed against this wall? Is this still Boston? You mumble. The curb looks very familiar. It is possible that this curb is a different curb that just looks similar. It may be one somewhere else in Massachusetts, or in any state, or Providence, or dynasty, or empire with curbs, sewer systems, and curbs. Even ancient Pompeii had sewer systems and curbs. The idea of curb, removed completely from any knowledge of archaeology, is unequivocally another pointless point of reference in regard to placement in time and space. Look up! To the left in the distance stands a hulking metal door. That's the hulking metal door to that Gothic dance club. There's no hulking metal door dance clubs in ancient Rome. There's no way of knowing if that statement is actually true, but this hulking metal door does not look like it is from Rome. It is too Gothic. There's not much Gothic architecture in Italy. That is a strange but true tidbit of trivial architectural knowledge that somehow got lodged in your brain, as a matter of fact. Probably got stuck in my brain because I started writing this book when I was in Italy. Or I went to Italy to write it, and then I started a band instead. So back to the book. This is ridiculous. There's no way that I am in ancient Rome. This door is undoubtedly the hulking metal door from Boston, Massachusetts, present day. The door is shut. It is waiting to be opened soon. Or it has recently been closed. Were you asleep? To the right, only an arm's reach away, a small line of punks, geeks, and drunks stand by the entrance of a club. They could be waiting to get into this club, possibly for the show you're about to play. They could be waiting outside to catch the bands as they leave the venue, possibly for the show you have just missed at the club adjacent but not affiliated with a Middle Eastern cafe. Would the boys from Wyoming play this show without you? They don't really need a second guitarist. They are normally a three-piece band. Well, now they're actually a four-piece band, the modern-day Lillingtons. But while in the studio, they double the rhythm guitars to sound like a four-piece band. Many groups use this technique. Some musicians add anywhere from 2 to 5 extra guitars, and one eccentric individual has gone so far as to claim to have added 100 tracks. That's what's-his-face from from the Smashing Pumpkins. I like that I call him What's-His-Face. I can't even remember his name right now. A live four-piece band sounds better than a three-piece. A singer, guitarist, can play leads without the backup losing its distorted power chord-driven rhythm. Plus, it is easier for a singer to play rhythm parts that do not stray too far from the beats of the vocal pattern. If he or she wants, this singer-guitarist can just stand there, singing, looking cool, holding the microphone with one hand and grasping the stand with the other, only striking a chord every now and then, while the whim strikes his or her fancy. This singer-guitarist can go so far as to point a finger into the audience randomly, just as a matter of happenstance, or flip the bird and pan it from one side of the audience to the other. This is usually highly applauded. It is a fuck you that touches upon fascinating levels of hypocritical irony unbeknownst to the gesticulator or to those he gesticulates. This, I think I bring it up later, but this one got me in trouble with Ben later. I think he had told Joe Queer that in his book, that in my book I make fun of him. But really, I think I lovingly actually talk about Joe Queer in this book. But I think it had to do with this passage combined with another passage that comes up. I'll probably reference it when I get to that point. So I continue. The bass player from the Boys from Wyoming would have come out to see you if you were here before, just going on stage and starting to play. That's right. Maybe you haven't been sitting here long, and he came out to look for you and didn't find anyone sitting here against this wall. Maybe he didn't even think to look for you because you aren't here with them. He would have no reason to look for someone if there was no notion that this person is supposed to be here. You remember me saying something to that effect earlier today. Or does that encounter happen later today? You are not even sure if it was said in a conversation or a third-person monologue, or if you were even you at the time. I'll let a little of this, as I'm reading it, but it makes me think that a lot of this writing came in response to Ben writing about my death in his book called Like Hell. And it's sort of my brain to get very metafictional. So the first book of this three-part book was a little bit more straightforward with that. And then now this book seems to be dealing with the meta of writing a book about having gotten killed in another book. So this is probably going to get even weirder. Yes, it is definitely possible that you are not here at all. It is a very conceivable conclusion. I also want to say, I'm interrupting a lot, I'm sorry about this. I also want to say that I never use metafiction without it resonating in some way emotional. Like, I really do feel at times where I just don't know who I am. And I also am a very nonlinear thinker in general, so I often lose track of time. Anybody could walk by this building and not see you sitting here or standing there with your back against this wall. It is easy to be absent from where you haven't been. It is the safest, most effortless thing for a sentient being to accomplish. It takes no exertion at all. No one is looking. You stare at your hand. It appears to be solid. You press it against the ground. The cold, wet fragments of concrete make imprints in your palm. What are you looking at? The bass player from the Boys from Wyoming is standing above you. You don't answer him. He could be talking to someone else, someone who is unquestionably there. Perhaps one of those indistinguishable bodies standing by the door, smoking cigarettes, or puking a thick yellow liquid into a bag, handing out Xeroxed and laser-printed zines, or exchanging email addresses. Jack, what are you looking at? Nothing. I'm just my hand. You look away from your palm and stare into the clouds above the world. It's raining. It's been raining since we got here. Wherever we go, the clouds are sure to follow. This is, you'll see as the book goes on that this is Cory from the Lillingtons, and he very easily became one of my best friends during this tour. It's sad that I don't get to see him as much these days. Did I miss the show? What are you talking about? The club hasn't even let the crowd in yet. You look past him. Patrons are in a small line waiting to get into the club. Well, that answers that question. What? How does me asking you a question answer the question for me? It wasn't the question that answered the question. It was the statement after the question that answered a former question that I asked myself. Oh. You look to your left. The hulking metal door must not have opened yet, which also means you haven't had that conversation in the club with me yet. That's rather odd. Here's your food money. He hands you a $10 bill. It is moist from the rain. You guys need this money. I can pay for myself. You can afford to be motivated by philanthropy. For the last 7 years, you have been living off royalties from a still-growing collection of steadily selling semi-popular records. This is no longer the truth. It is a lower to middle-class subsistence, but you can make it look as if you are raking in a middle to higher middle-class wage. The illusion is accomplished by living an off-center yet frugal lifestyle. You don't have a car insurance, or health insurance. Still don't have that. You buy $1.75 men's dress shoes, $3 black pants, and $2.50 black double-breasted jackets from a village discount down the street. You wear them until they fall off your body. That's still true. You own a large, empty, white, wood-framed house with a lifelong friend from high school near the suburbs, where bandmates and musicians crash and rehearse and help to pay the mortgage. I actually just paid that off, so that's one thing I own. Woohoo! It's still got insurance on that, though. It's pretty high. And you sublease a one-room apartment close to the center of the city that is also used as an office, mostly paid for by the small record label you and Franklin started. That building is no longer there. It was in Lincoln Park on Diversey in Sheffield, but they tore that down to build condos quite a while ago. You always have money for popcorn, macaroni, and inexpensive shampoo. You lend great sums of cash to friends that are constantly in dire straits. Sometimes you get paid back. I often feel bad lately. Once again, I'm interrupting a lot. I haven't been able to do this over the last couple of years. I don't have much money, and it's one of those things where you don't want to. People treat me really well, and they give me things and they take care of me because of my past exploits. But it feels really, really hard not being able to repay those gifts these days, and sometimes I feel like I'm explaining to people like, oh, if I had money, I would be doing just the same. And then I stop. Anyway, the loans, free lunches, train fares, etc. are not written down in ledgers. There are no paper trails at all. You obviously do much better than most of your artistic friends, the musicians, artists, actors, and directors. You never expect the money returned. The payback would only increase their outstanding debts. Oh, speaking of which, there's an actor who used to be in my shows, and he was also a director. He's a good friend of mine. His name is David Cromer, and actually back then I was paying him his rent a lot and giving him food for money, and now he's like a famous director on Broadway. It's interesting. Art and performance are difficult vocations in which to create a livable income. At times you feel guilty that you are able to subsist and prosper doing the things you love to do. Other times it gets frustrating that people don't appreciate the hard work that is involved with getting to and staying where you are now. Each day at least a little time is spent wondering how you can make creativity work for you next. Well, that hasn't stopped. And this in turn keeps in motion the ceaseless reevaluation of how necessity, business, and personal gains affect the purity of the creative process. That also has not stopped being on my mind. I don't care about your fancy schmancy semi-famous royalties. What has that band done for you lately? This is an unanswerable question, my friend, and has nothing to do with you giving me money. A check to semi-famous from Duck Records is pretty much guaranteed to arrive at the post box every quarter. The amount is never consistent, Living off royalties is not like getting that same check every 2 weeks from the average salary job. There are times when the money from the quarterly check barely pays the bills that accumulate, and then you find yourself living off credit cards. It gets complicated, but you are pretty good at paying the overdue credit bills when the money flow increases. Since then, that actually stopped. When we sold Panic Button Records, we were supposed to get a big buyout, and the buyout from Lookout didn't actually happen all the time, so I started living off credit cards, and then I got in debt to the credit cards, and those are still sitting over my head to this day, like $80,000 from Panic Button Record stuff. They've kind of stopped calling me now since it's like 20 years later, but now I don't use credit cards anymore. I just use debit cards and cash. It's the way big business function. This is not a comforting realization. It is just a fact. In many ways, your little punk rock band functions as just another by-the-book, small corporation keeping the international economy liquid. You never thought you would end up having credit cards, but now I don't. Most of your childhood friends had savings and checking accounts, while you were still filling socks and drawers and shoeboxes and closets with wads of dollar bills. This is actually a combining of me and Ben, because Ben actually did that a lot more than me. I did too. I was always saving money and hoarding it, but so there's that. This is similarity you shared with Franklin Famous. Oh, I say it right there. He always preferred hiding money under his bed than putting it in the hands of financial experts. Now the two of you run a couple of corporations and maintain a cumulative 7 bank accounts. There are personal, employee, and corporate taxes you have to keep track of and pay for 4 times a year. The financial responsibilities boggle your mind. There are royalties to calculate and send out quarterly to 13 band members and at least 9 band-related affiliates scattered all over the country, plus mechanical royalties paid to other bands for songs Semi-Famous has covered. There's an accountant you must visit about every other month. Once a year, you pay a lawyer you have never met to file annual corporate reports that you never see. This eventually was one of the reasons that I approached Ben about leaving Weasels Inc. and at the time got all fucked up in meaning me leaving Screeching Weasel. But anyway, maybe I'll talk about that later down the line. Joseph Crank has been the band's accountant for well over a decade. He takes on many, many lower-paying jobs, which is your case. Plus, he takes on some highly successful executives to help pay his bills. But he prefers helping the little people, like you and himself. Semi-Famous is the only entertainment account he handles. This makes for some interesting and sometimes naive conversations about the music business. I don't think this is completely true. He actually would handle Joe Vindictive too, but I don't know to what level, whether it's just his personal stuff or band stuff too. But we actually found out about this accountant through Joe Vindictive. It is a strange thing you have worked with this older fellow for so long that it has allowed for the relationship to take a slow turn into an uncomfortable friendship. One day while walking out of his office, it occurred to you that he knew more about your life and personality than the average business associate. You no longer had to shake his hand when you finished executing a business transaction. It is a friendship formed by compulsory legal business, forthright financial transactions, and the constant ebb and flow of time. He is not a chum you would call up to go to a movie or consult when you are deeply depressed, but a close enough buddy to worry about and look forward to seeing. I sadly haven't seen him for years and years now. I don't have Weasel business anymore, and my personal accounting got so messed up that I couldn't pay him anymore. So it's been about 7 years since I've seen Jerry Critch, is his real name. He is enjoyable to listen to, whether he is chatting about his family or his tenants, or even in his persistence in trying to sell you an old, run-down, sick horse that he bought from a senile cowboy who runs a rent-a-stall corral 4 hours away from the big city. It was not a wise financial purchase for him. He felt sorry for the horse. He never came right out and said so, but he bought that horse because he saw its unpleasant conditions in the barn next to his young, sprightly black stallions, and wanted the poor, overworked horse to die somewhere comfortable. Every time you see him, he says, "Would you like to buy a horse?" "No, I think carrying around these ancient band responsibilities are enough for me right now. Thank you." "It's a wonderful investment," he says with an ironic smile. He is petting a deaf and blind old dog that he brought home from a pound not too long ago. He asked to be given the most down-and-out dog they had, the one that nobody else wanted. They gave him one that died a month later after he had paid for hundreds of dollars of treatments and operations for him. He then went back and got the next dog that nobody else wanted. This one is living happily now on his lap. He loves this dog. This is something about Jerry Critcher that I'll never forget. I mean, he works with my guys and he smokes a big cigar and is just like an old-timey guy, but he's probably one of the more kind people I know at heart. 1 hour visits easily turn into entire afternoons listening to his begrudging prejudices, battling stereotypes and truisms. He believes in quite a few of the popular racial stereotypes about Jews, white trash, yuppies, and African Americans, but he does not allow them to interfere with his ability to relate to a person one-on-one. His subtle legal and governmental rebelliousnesses often shock you, as if all accountants should be misers, cynics, and Republicans. At times when he thinks he is saying something leftist, risky, or unacceptable by the majority, he will lower his voice and pretend he is whispering. No one could possibly hear him except for his secretary, who also happens to be his wife and comedic straight man. Many hours are spent with him trying to convince you that Semi-Famous should write just one mainstream hit. Why don't you and Franklin write a song like this? He points to his mid-70s transistor radio. From the mono speaker comes the sound of Whitney Houston. Your objective should be to go out there and make a pointless piece of mainstream trash that will make millions of dollars. He leans back in his chair and puts his hands across his belly that you have seen grown slowly over the years. He is proud of himself. He looks at you, raises his eyebrows, and then brushes his mustache with his hand. And then he finishes his thought accompanied by a hand signal involving only one finger. Just once. He grins and raises his eyebrows again. He waits for you to respond. He talks in a joking manner, but underneath the humorous nudges lurks the accountant's universal incentive. He wants the band to do something to further your and Franklin's careers without the damn do-it-yourself integrity and disgust of the mediocrity inherent in the mainstream interfering. Sometimes in mid-laugh or while shaking the bottle of dead sea monkeys that sits on his desk, for a split second you catch yourself thinking along similar lines. The money is yours. It's part of the deal, buddy. The bass player from the Boys from Wyoming looks at you and smirks. You don't want him to pay for your food. Really, it's not a big deal. I live off the band. Semi-Famous is pretty famous, you know. I can pay for both you and me. I could buy your ass, you cheap punk bastard. I could put your whole fucking band in my back pocket and still have room for this entire dead-end city. All right, Mr. Hughes. Just take the money. You look at him and feel a double-edged guilt stabbing you right in the paradox. If you don't accept it, he will be offended. But if you take it, it will deplete their cash supply. They can use every penny they save. I can pay for myself. Not when you're with us. You're part of this band now. He smiles. He is proud to be playing with J.J. Bedbug, and you are happy to be back on the road with him by your side. There's something inspiring about being inspiring. Thanks. You take the money. You don't know what this means to me. It don't add up to much, being in this band, I mean, but it's good to have you here. And then he doesn't. Oh, this is important, because it's a lot of my negative stuff. I'm going to start this over. It don't add up to much, being in this band, I mean, but it's good to have you here. And then he doesn't put his hand on your shoulder and pat it affectionately, but he does say, let's go get something to eat. You hungry again? He looks at you, laughs a little, leans heavily on his left hip, and scratches his chest. This image reminds you that he is from Wyoming. His accent and way of holding his body is reminiscent of country characters seen at the movies and on television. Jerry Reed in Smokey and the Bandit, John Voight in Midnight Cowboy, James Garner as Maverick, Chuck Connors as the Rifleman, and the witty rat-a-tat of those two guys on that '70s show about truckers. I haven't eaten since yesterday. He points up the street to the right. There's that sub place up there on the corner. You said you wouldn't mind eating there. I don't feel like eating McDonald's again. Didn't we just eat there a little while ago? If yesterday is a little while ago, sure thing. You don't gotta eat. You could just get something to drink. He points at you. But I'm not taking that money back. You are hungry. You recall having just eaten there, at that very sub place, the one on the other side of the street from the Middle Eastern cafe. But you are hungry, and the bass player from the Boys from Wyoming hasn't eaten since yesterday, and in a different town, in a different state. Where did the band play yesterday? If today is still today. About 2 weeks ago, you met them in Texas, dropped off the rent-a-car and joined them in the van, and then headed east. You were probably in New York yesterday. No recollection of that city at all. How odd. Onion rings? What? I think you said onion rings. I guess they do, Jack. They probably got onion rings, fries, and subs, too. There it is. Chapter 1 of Book 2. I had a lot of digressions on that one, but I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And that's it. Good night, or good morning, good afternoon. Okay, guys, you're going to get tired of this until you actually donate to my Patreon or give me a little money to do the GoFundMe for my book about my mother. I'm going to continue these Weasel things no matter what, because I really enjoy them. But please, if you like these, just give a little couple dollars, and it'll help a lot. It'll go a far distance. Thank you very much, and that's it.